Okay, so just one last confirmation before that you can hear me before we get going here. It's all sounding okay for everybody?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so perfect, thanks. All right, so and I believe the recording, yep, the recording's going. So what we're going to do is just kind of quick overview. Our main focus this year is certainly on the Math 8 as far as videos go, but discussion just kind of general enough that it'll apply to some of the other courses. I know that there's some biology courses or videos that are going to be made and a few others as well, but just a quick overview of the general process. And before we get into it, just to kind of put it in context, this is kind of how we're envisioning the course to be laid out. In other words, you know, to have a video, quick summary of that video below. In other words, not a video just by itself, but just a quick intro and then a quick summary, so that if someone's doing a bit of studying, they don't necessarily have to go back and watch the entire video. They can just check the quick scan of the overview, and if they remember it well, then perhaps they don't have to watch the whole thing, and you know, stuff like that. And then also lots of examples, and so the examples for them to practice, and a little bit of JavaScript just to hide the answers for them and stuff like that. All the JavaScript templates are in the development course, so you're welcome to grab anything there. And if you need help with any of the JavaScript, just let myself or Barb know, and we can certainly help you out with that. But yeah, continuing on with the practice, and then perhaps another video and a summary below that. So as well, whenever you can fit it in, if there's an area that you can use one of the HTML5 games to kind of give them a little bit of practice on some of the stuff that they've been working on, then definitely grab one of those as well. And again, the HTML5 games, you all have access to the development platform or the generator there. So, you know, give them a try, and if you need any help on your first couple, then by all means give a yell. So that's kind of the context that we are seeing the videos end up in. And so any questions about that? Does that look good to everybody? Is everybody kind of in agreement that that's not a bad layout?
This is only if you are creating videos from scratch. So if you're embedding videos from YouTube or other sources, you just need the basic summary at the top. Is that right?
Yeah. So I mean, you could certainly do the same thing if you were using other videos. In other words, the summary of the video below it, if you wish and stuff. Certainly within our courses, we're going to have the occasional video that, you know, we didn't create because there's a great one out there that seems stable and we'll just use. And so yeah, for that kind of thing. You know, so what I'm talking about here is kind of going forward and how the layout for the math should be, and however you apply it to the other courses would be great. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question about the? I emailed
Sure.
you about this, the game templates. I asked you whether we were able to go back in on a game that we created to edit, and you were looking at possibly doing a option for that. Is that still being worked on, or do we not have that option?
Okay, good. Yeah. So to some degree, so basically at this point, to go back to an existing one, you would have to let me know, and then we would kind of modify in the back end. What we did add for an editor was when you're building and you finish your game, you can preview it at that point and see if it, and then play through it once and make sure that it does what you expect it to do. And if you find that you know, there's something, whoops, you know, that's incorrect, or there was a little problem there, then you're able to edit it there before it actually gets posted. So that's the editing feature we added to it. As far as going back to an existing one, no, there's not a structure in place for that. So you could just rebuild it again and tell us to delete the old one. If you all, you know, have all your graphics and stuff, that might be the fastest way to do it. Or if you know, there was just one little thing that needed to be changed, you could just send us the new image and we could write over the existing one there or something like that. So
Right. Okay.
yeah. So as far as here we are in Captivate, and so Billy and I have been going back and forth, and Captivate on a Mac looks a little bit different when you're dealing with the animations. So that was something that we found out. So if you kind of have that choice of a Mac or a PC version of it, and we weren't sure if it was the settings themselves that made it a little different, but we couldn't see what the difference was. So it could be that the Mac version is just a little different, or there were some settings we didn't see. So that's one thing just to point out up front. Um, when I go to start off with a new video, I certainly go and grab one of my older ones. In other words, spent some time setting up a template, and the dimensions of it are very suitable for uploading to YouTube, and it'll play on a big screen quite nicely. And so it's a fair compromise between being a humongous file and still decent quality there. So in other words, a teacher can put it on a projector in a classroom and it still looks pretty decent. So here's what I would do if I were starting a new video. So I'd pull up one that I had. So I have a couple videos that are open here. This one's one that we did earlier, that it's just kind of solving one problem on basically one slide. In other words, it all fits onto one slide. So that was quite an easy one as far as just having 3 slides available: the introduction, the working through the process, and then the summary, which is just using highlight boxes to say, in this tutorial, here's what we did, a quick overview of the whole thing. Probably more typical is one where you're going through and you're explaining a concept in a couple of different ways, and then maybe getting to an example, and then having your overall summary at the end. So what I would normally do is, you've done the script, you've drawn out a little bit of a layout of it, you've done your audio clips, and now you're into this, so you open up an existing one. And what I normally do is I just go here and I just say slides, new slide from blank. And so what I do is I just create, let's say my new one, I have 3 audio clips or 4 audio clips. So slide inserts or new slide from blank. So I just create 4 new slides there, and they come up blank. And then that way, if I want to, I can grab anything from down here. In other words, rather than recreating a nice little arrows or something like that, or something that I find useful, I can always grab it and pull it back up to here, but I'm not having to delete everything and kind of move things out of the way. So I'm starting off with a fairly fresh slide. And then I head up to here, and on the first slide, I'll right click and audio, import. And so then I go and I look for the audio file that I just made for this new video, right? And so then I plug that into this one, and then I say, okay, well, I didn't need that picture, and I didn't need that, and I don't need that guy. And so now I have basically, if I wanted to do multiplying and dividing integers, I can just multiplying and dividing integers, and there I am. I'm ready to get started. And now if I have some images or stuff in mind for my introduction, I can bring those in and talk about them at that point. And then, yep, off to the next slide. Right click, audio, import, bring in your clip number 2 and clip number 3. And then at that point, I just kind of build from here. Now, one of the biggest things about getting used to Captivate, so if you notice, I just went down and clicked on timeline, and so I can drag that up a little bit. So a fairly simple timeline right now, because really all we have is the background. We have the WCLN up in the corner, and we have the instructions up there. I kept the WCLN separate from the background just in case you ended up in a situation where you're kind of filling the whole screen and you find that WCLN is kind of in the way. Then what you can do is you can just click on it and go to timing and say, oh, well, I can either have that there for the whole rest of the project, or I can just have it for the rest of the slide. And then after the introduction, it just fades out and it's gone for the rest of it, and you can fill up your whole screen if you wish. So that's the only reason that those are separated. If you find that you have lots of room and you want that thing up there all the time, then just click Rest a Project. It appears after 0 seconds and it goes for the rest of the project. And then at the very end, it fades out at the very bottom here. It fades out and it takes 3 seconds to fade out, and so it looks nice and off you go. Now, with it on Rest a Project, as you'll notice, any of these screens below it now have that sitting there. So basically, it's in the way for everything now. In the same way, this one right here, I have it set up that, you know, for the kind of plan where, yeah, go ahead and knock on that door. So the plan for this one was that I have it disappear so that there was lots of room for my you know, follow-up. If I found that I didn't need the room, then I could just switch it to Rest a Project. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense for you know, the timing and stuff like that. That's why these below ones, they look like they're totally blank because there's nothing on them. But when you click on them to start working, you still see the background and everything else, because those other ones became, you know, started off on the first slide, and they're set to exist for the entire project. So they're going to be in the background for all of it. So they're no longer on the timelines, but they are in the background. So does that make sense for everybody? Is there anything to answer about that? Okay, so so basically at this point, if I were to, you know, starting with a question, I may come down here, grab one of these, and just say, you know, multiplying and dividing integers, you know, positive times positive, you know, or whatever I want to say. And basically, you know, grabbing these, basically what this is this is just a text box. Now, the text box is by default. So if I go, so over here on the right here, you can notice I can jump between properties and timing. So if I go to properties, that's kind of how you want things to look and so on. So basically, this box here is a caption type, and I pick transparent just so that it doesn't look like it's in a box. But you can, you know, by default, it has all these different backgrounds that you can choose and stuff like that. But for most of, I find the backgrounds look like there are buttons everywhere, so I usually just go with transparent, so it looks like I'm just kind of walking through it. Now, the properties themselves, you have a little bit of option as far as, you know, how you want to play with everything, and you know, if I choose that, here's the font. If I want to make it look bigger, I have the opportunity to do that, and the color and everything like that. As far as the timing, if I go down here, now if I were wanting to say that in my audio I say, okay, one of the first things we're going to learn about is, you know, the positives and negatives or something like that, and at about the 4-second point I bring up the idea of positive times positive, then I can just drag that over to 4 seconds. Or if I head up to here, I could have entered it in by text, just say it starts at 4 seconds. And this one will run for the rest of the slide. In other words, I'll be done talking about positives times positives and negatives times negatives by the end of this slide. So I'll just have everything kind of finish at the end of the slide. And then at the bottom, the fade in and out, I typically do 2 seconds in and out. And it just means that it just gradually, so it just fades in like that. And at the end of the slide, it fades out over 2 seconds. So my standard is just kind of everything fading in and out for 2 seconds, unless I have highlight box or little arrows pointing at things, and sometimes you're kind of jumping from place to place a little fast, and 2 seconds is a little too much, so you kind of bring it down to 1 second or something like that. So, and then once you have that, then you can just Control C and Control V, and negative times a negative, and negative times a negative. And let's say you were talking about negative times negative, and in your audio, you found that you were talking about that at about 8 seconds. So we just drag that up to here, or again, we could have entered it up here. We want that to appear for the rest of the slides so that, again, our audio clip is starting into an example or another point on the next slide. So we'll just have this stick around. It'll fade out at the end of this audio clip, and everything's cool. So, so basically that's it. And if I want to come back and I want to say, So I'm just jumping ahead to one of these slides down here. If I want to say, and because, and you're referring back to, yeah, but remember that the positive times positive, I can always put a little highlight box there, and then it's kind of like you pointing it out. So some people prefer arrows, some people prefer highlight boxes, or I use kind of a combination of them both. So let's say I find out about the 11-second mark. I'm saying, and remember back in the positive times positive, you ended up with a positive and it's exact same as the negative, then I can put the highlight box there and it will fade in at that point. And so again, by default, I have it as 2 and 2, fading in for 2 seconds, and then at the end of the slide, fading out for 2 seconds. If, on the other hand, I'm just playing with the timing just to kind of help people get a good feel for the timeline there. So if, on the other hand, this highlight box, I certainly don't want it for the rest of the slide because I'm just talking about that one point, I'll go up here to timing, and I'll just say, let's play it for a specific time. Let's play it for 4 seconds. All right, so now we can see that it fades in, and after 4 seconds starts to fade out, and there we go. So of course I hadn't deleted the audio clip from this, so it's just what happens to be in there. So are there any questions about that? Does that all make sense to everybody?
Yeah, so the fading, can you hear me all right, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So fading, some of them I haven't been doing, but if that's, it probably does, it is pretty effective. So what I'll try, because I do it with PowerPoint, which, I mean, but I can accomplish the same thing with fading. So if I think that probably does bring attention to it pretty well, right, with the fading?
Yeah, it's a preference thing for sure. I just find that it's a little dramatic sometimes when you have things just flash and appear kind of idea.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah.
a tiny bit of transition kind of makes it a little more mellow, I guess. And so some people may say, well, that's too mellow. I like it a little more flashy. It's up to you. Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sorry I was a bit late joining. I was finishing up with a student, and they have a test tomorrow, so I didn't want to leave them high and dry. So.
Yeah, by all means. No, there's quite a few people who weren't able to make it, so I'm glad you were able to.
Yeah. Okay.
So, from an introduction point of view, Francis and Billy, so you guys have seen tons of really good quality chemistry videos, and those are done by Daryl, so really I have very little to teach Daryl at this.
Well, it's all I can learn something. There's some great math videos I've looked at from you, too. So.
Yeah, so we'll just trade ideas as we go. So throw in anything as you come along. That's great.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
And so as far as once I'm done with the slide, then one thing that people kind of find surprising is in Captivate, the default is quite often that you either have it here, or if you injected it into a slide that used to be longer, it'll be way out here. And you'll see that my audio finishes right around the 18 seconds mark. And so what you want to do is you want to just come out here, and you can just drag it in there, and not right to the end. And you may think that that sounds a little funny, but add a couple seconds to the end, because when you're finishing one topic and you're talking about the positives and the negatives, and next we'll get into an example, having a pause there as things fade out and then fade back in actually works quite nice. It took me a while to kind of get used to the idea that going back to all my slides and checking the end and just adjusting that so it just kind of goes to the end of the audio, and a couple seconds in addition to that usually ends up sounding the best, even though you sometimes think, oh, I kind of don't want much of a gap there, but usually ends up sounding better. So play with that when you're fooling around with it. Now, if I think that everything's cool in this slide, then I'll be playing it from here, and I'll jump it back to the beginning. So at the very bottom, you can notice I'm just playing with the and oh, I screwed up that. Okay, this should be a little bit over here. And so that I spend a lot of time fiddling like that. So just kind of getting your timing right. So as you're saying things, and there is certainly lots of leeway. And as far as you're talking through it, if it appears a second too late, really doesn't matter. But I usually play in there a little bit to try and make things flow nicely. And then once I check the end that I got a couple seconds beyond the audio, then I'm comfortable that that slide's done. On to the next. and now I've got the audio clip in there, and I start building that one. Now, like I mentioned, there's a couple ways of approaching it. For me, I find that most often, one example, fits on one page like this, and then I would, start another example, and I may copy some things over to the next example and run it from there. But that's generally how I lay it out. And then I always have a summary at the end, and usually my summary is just I go in and grab things from the previous ones, and just in doing a lot of looking at some of the best videos and some of the best suggestions I found out there, that it was always run a quick summary at the end. Even if it's very repetitive, it just allows a student who's spent 5 minutes with you going over a lot of things that are fairly new to them to just stop and reflect on that stuff. So it doesn't have to be long, but just a quick summary I've become a believer in. So
yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah. Thanks. Because some of my chemistry ones I didn't, but I see with the math ones that you do, it's really good to have those in there. So
okay, thanks.
Yeah, great.
And so basically, as far as that goes, it's just getting used to that timeline and inserting things and stuff like that. As far as being able to pull images and so on, you saw the notes that Daryl and I were both finding that this one site had some nice images, including that one guy at the very beginning there that I deleted him already. And so we did purchase a license for that, so you are welcome to grab anything from there. Anytime you grab an image from there, it's ours forever, even if the licensing goes, in case you're questioning that. All you have to do is you just have to, when you grab that image, there'll be a certificate there. Just grab the certificate and store it with your development files. So at some point in the year, as we get into the summer, I'll be asking you for all your development files, only because we want to keep everything kind of in a central location. Ruler. And so basically, just keep your certificate in with your Captivate files and stuff like that, and you should be good. Just give me 1 second here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now.
Sorry, that certificate, you sent it to us when?
No, when you're on that site, on the FreePix site, and you go and you grab an image from now on, there'll always be a place that says download your certificate for this image.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so you just click on it, and it's a little PDF, and you just stick it in with your other stuff. And then that way, we can show that we've had the licensing, and they'd probably be happy with that. But worst case, we can always prove that, yes, we did grab this image during that time, and we have the certificate to show that. So
great, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. One of the things that you may find interesting, and it took me a while before I played around with it, was the effects and so on. So I'll show you a little bit on the effects. I'm not expecting that, if you're fairly new to it, you may avoid those at the beginning, but nevertheless, here, let's just show. So if I have, an item like this, and I want it to, after a little while, I want it to kind of move up to a certain location on a graph or on a timeline or whatever, what I can do is I can go to timing, and then down here under effects, I can just go to, and here's all your different effects. So you can, things can scale up and scale down and all that kind of stuff. Probably the most popular one is the motion path. And so, and again, you can grab the left to right. And it's funny, even if you don't want to do left or right, if you're going up or down or anywhere else, left to right is a nice one to grab. And then see, you can just always pull it wherever you want. So now, here's so as you can see, so I have that table moving up as an example there. Now the thing is that the way to understand how the timing in the motion works is kind of important. So let's say this little ball here, I'm going to have it, so the timing of the ball, I'm going to bring it right back to the beginning, and let me get rid of some of this other clutter. Okay, so here, let's do that. Oh, I got it a little confused. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that one. Here, let's just 1 second here. See, so I can just go and I say, okay, I got it confused, so I'm just going to delete that motion. Okay, now I'll add a new one. Motion path, left to right. And again, it kind of ends up by default left to right, but you can make it go wherever you want. So let's say I want to send it up there. Now, there's two things as far as timing goes. One is when this object appears on your screen, and the other is when you want it to start moving. They may not necessarily be the same. So when I have the ball, if I go up here to the timing, I can have this for a specific time or for the rest of the project or whatever I want, and I can have it appear after 0 seconds. But let's say that I start talking about the ball moving after 6 seconds. So in other words, I want the ball to sit there from the beginning, and then after 6 seconds, it starts moving. So here's where I look down at the duration, right down at the bottom here, and I can say the effect starts at 6. So in other words, that's 6 seconds after the ball appears on the slide, we're going to start the motion. And then the effect duration is just how long do you want it to take to go from there to there. If you want it to go really fast, you can stick in a 1. And so let's see what that looks like. So where it just sits there for the first 6 seconds, and then bang, up there in 1 second. Now, if I wanted that to be nice and slow, I could put in 3 seconds or whatever, right? Now, the arrow there, of course, when you're actually producing or publishing your project, that arrow isn't going to show up. That's just part of the editing, showing you what's being edited and so on. So if you want to preview how everything's going to look, we can, play the. Yeah, so, and sometimes, oh, there, I'll shut myself up there. Okay, so basically, if you want to see what it's going to look like published, and you've got a number of slides going and you've got some motion, sometimes it's easiest just to go up there and do the preview project, and then it'll open it up. And that will give you the most close to your published result that you're going to see. So, so that's the motion one. So really, I find that when people are starting off with Captivate, if they've worked with a video editor before, then usually the timeline's like a no-brainer. But if you're new to that, then the timeline, it takes a little while to get used to. And so if you get used to just switching between properties and timing, and you have an idea for when things appear and when they fade in and fade out and stuff like that, then that will be a real help with the timeline. And then that will get you going, and you'll be able to produce a whole bunch of things from there. And then as you get fancier, you'll bring in some animation there and so on. So that's really all I was going to bring up here. I guess one thing, the ability to switch out your background. In other words, if you take one of mine, of course, your first time, you're going to want to switch the background to your own. And so if you go under Properties, you can click here, and it shows this is what it's currently called in the library. So if I click on there and I just import, and you just go find your own background, it will replace it with that. And so that's a nice simple way of swapping that out. I quite often lock that background just so that it kind of stays out of the way, and when I'm dragging things around, it won't allow me to suddenly drag, and I'm suddenly moving my background back into place all the time. That gets kind of annoying. So so yeah, once you have your background, you're happy with it, just lock it into place, and off you go. And then if you are using your own templates for future ones, then you don't even have to worry about that anymore. If you find that, and I'll mention that if you find any of the videos that I've done in the past maybe have some features that you say, oh, I'm going to use something similar to that, certainly you can just give me a yell and say, I'd like the Captivate file for this particular one, and I'll make sure you get it. So, just feel free to take a look through, some that are made, and if something is close to what you want to make, it might help you make it go faster for yourself. So anyways, there wasn't a lot I wanted to cover here. It was mostly just to kind of get you past that initial startup for those who are just kind of getting going with it. And so totally open to a few questions here. Otherwise, we'll just finish it up in the next 5. Okay, here's a question that comes to mind. As far as access to Captivate, I think everybody, I've had a lot of questions, so I hope at this point everybody has access to Captivate. If you don't, then here's kind of the instructions that have been kind of passed along. That is, most of the districts out there, have some kind of Adobe license. So ask around, and quite often, DL administrators or so on will say, oh, well, if you're learning about that, sure, we can pick you up a license for that or whatever. And that's quite often mostly how BCLN works, is that, most of the licensing and stuff like that is just what you have in your district. Given that, Captivate is a little bit different enough that not everybody's going to have that. So if you find that you don't have access to that, then we can certainly work it out so that there is a monthly license available for Captivate, and you can go and grab the latest version, which is the 2017 version, and just charge us, I think it's about $30 a month or something like that. So you charge us an hour and a half extra or something like that, and that will pay for that and the taxes and whatever else. So if you just let me know what your plans are in that, but yes, you can certainly just put it on your invoice as an extra hour and a half of work, and just call it software, and that will cover you for that during the project. So, however you get access to the Captivate, we want to make sure that you're ready to go and have a good start into it. So, okay, I'm going to shut up for a second and try and think of if there are any other questions that have come along. If you think of any, certainly. Yeah, I can't think of any more. So yeah, basically, really, you just have to get in there. I do really suggest following the idea of making the script and doing the layout. I have certainly along the way decided, oh, I've done so many of these videos, I'm going to go without a script, and I pretty much every time kind of go, why did I do that? Because I just end up kind of like a discussion like this. You have a lot of ums, and it just doesn't flow quite as nice as if you have something in front of you that you can keep the flow going. So I would strongly suggest going with the script and the layout, and then doing the audio. And if there's the little audio video that I did there, hopefully that helps get some ideas for that. Daryl, if there's anything that I missed in there, this is a great time to suggest, because I mean, you have amazing audio from your end.
I'm just wondering if it's okay if I just continue with the PowerPoint and the Camtasia.
Oh yeah, you betcha.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, because it's a lot of learning curve for me to learn the.
Yeah, no, you've
Adobe.
already got a system that works well for you. Yeah, for those who are starting off new, I'm encouraging this as the way to go. But you're not going to change a good thing.
And what I'll do is I'll keep looking at yours and just kind of look at the effects you use and stuff like this, and kind of try and get it as close to kind of yours as possible, so that
and vice versa. Like, I mean,
right,
I'm not going to try and change yours. So other than that, let me know if you do have some questions. Hopefully this gets you on your way, and I'd like to think that everybody kind of gets in there and starts playing with this soon. The sooner you start playing with it, then you can kind of whittle away at it without it becoming a big stress of knocking off your videos, and ask questions and spread it out would be great. So get going on it. Let me know if you have any questions, and otherwise, have yourselves a great evening.
Okay, thanks, Brent.